Welcome everyone to the Cyber Corner podcast with a new episode today with a special guest with us. Now, for making a basic question, from the beginning, can you explain what is the importance of a compliance, in the field of cybersecurity? First of all, what is a compliance itself? And then what is the importance of that compliance in the cybersecurity generally? Are some of the key compliance frameworks and the standards that organizations need to be aware of. Now, absolutely, I can say it depends on the activity of the field itself, right? What are the biggest challenges organizations face in achieving and maintaining compliance? Now, I'm a company, okay, or I'm an organization, and now I just decided to be a compliant, with this kind of frameworks. Now, what is the first challenges that I can found and I have to work on to achieve that compliance? What about my partner? So how I can ensure that the company that I'm dealing with them or my partners, they are also respecting this kind of standards. Welcome everyone to the Cyber Corner podcast with a new episode today with a special guest with us. I want to welcome with me a great cybersecurity expert and a mentor. It's an honor to be with a Dr.Iretioluwa today. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. It's such a pleasure. And absolutely, I'm going to leave more, the word to introduce more yourself for the audience and what you're doing in the cybersecurity field.
All right. Thank you for having me today. My name is Dr.Iretioluwa Akerele. I'm a cybersecurity career coach and mentor. I'm also a cybersecurity professional with experience that spans over industry, consulting, and of course, research. I have great expertise around implementation of best practice standards and frameworks like the ISO 27001 standard, PCI DSS, NIST cybersecurity framework, GDPR, and so on and so forth. Outside of that, I also founded an organization called CyBlack, which is there to support people to achieve their cybersecurity goals. CyBlack has been in existence since 2021, and we have amazing success stories. I also have an organization called Cyber Limited. Cyber Limited supports individuals and organizations in improving their security posture. Currently, we run cybersecurity trainings for individuals, and we run different cybersecurity services for organizations like risk management, security awareness and training, implementation of best practice, and so on and so forth.
That's totally awesome, and absolutely, it's an amazing background, which meets totally our topic today when it comes to talk about the pivotal role of compliance in cybersecurity. So here's the thing, sometimes, okay, when we talk about cybersecurity, technically, this kind of technical things, I think that we have absolutely to talk about the compliance and how a company must respect those kind of compliance. Now, for making a basic question, from the beginning, can you explain what is the importance of a compliance, in the field of cybersecurity? First of all, what is a compliance itself? And then what is the importance of that compliance in the cybersecurity generally?
Okay. So when you talk about compliance, you're trying to say that organizations should adhere to certain things, and those things can be industry regulations, it can be standards, it can be laws, depending on the nature of the business and the type of the organization. Why is compliance important? Compliance is important because you will agree with me that when there is no law, when there is no rule, people just tend to do what they like, and they just bring forward what they feel is okay. But the moment there are laws, there are rules, there are guidelines, there are policies, they're all in place, it means that people are now self-aware that, okay, we need to do things right. We need to follow this guideline. We need to follow this rule. We need to follow this law. And this is why compliance is very important. It's just like, when you go to someone's house and the person says that I need you to comply with the rule of my house. Whenever you come into my house, you have to remove your shoe at the entrance. I mean, it's the role of that person's house when you don't have any choice but to remove your shoe at the entrance because you need to comply to that rule. The same ideology applies to organizations. When an organization says that we need to comply to industry regulation, and by so doing, we need to meet the requirements of the ISO 27001 standard. If you are working in such an organization, you already know that there's no other choice but to begin to comply to the requirements of the standard. So if the standard says, for example, that for every employee coming into the organization newly, we need to screen them. We need to have a background check for them. And by so doing, we have to go through some certain screening, which covers the terms and conditions of employment and other things. You already know that because you're an employee of that organization, there's no other way, but you have to go through the screening because the company is trying to meet an industry regulation or comply to an industry regulation or a standard. So this is why compliance is important. It's important because it just helps organizations to stay, in line with what is right, stay in line with best practice requirements, and ensure that while doing so, they're also improving their security posture.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a super great example, by the way. And here, I can see like when we talk about the compliance, it exists like a lot of frameworks and a lot of standards. And then, the next question comes about that. What are some of the key compliance frameworks and the standards that organizations need to be aware of? Now, absolutely, I can say like it depends on the activity of the field itself, right? So, but I can say like if we can cite, the most known one, okay, those kind of frameworks and standards, which one gonna be?
Okay, so frameworks and standards, there are lots of them. And again, it depends on different things. One, the country. So country, based on the country, you kind of see in this particular country, organizations are tilting towards this framework more. They are tilting towards the standard more. So it depends on the type of the business. So for example, you find that financial organizations could be stricter in terms of compliance, and they need to meet some certain standards and frameworks and regulations. So they tilt towards this some kind of standards. You also find that an organization in another sector, maybe government, for example, is looking to comply to some other set of standards and frameworks. So the type of business or the sector that the business operates in is also critical to determine what they need to comply to. Having said that, I'll just touch on some key standards and frameworks. I'll start with the ISO 27001. Why ISO 27001? It's an internationally acceptable standard that supports organizations to establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve their information security management system. What does that mean? It means that the standard in itself has given some set of one, mandatory clauses, and two sets of controls that organizations need to look at and begin to align. So in an organization, you can say, what is our current state in terms of security? The ISO 27001 is there to give you like a best practice state or a future state or a target state that you need to meet, such that if you are doing your security, or if your policies, processes, and technologies in a certain way currently, you need to begin to think of what is the best way to do it based on what the standard is saying. Why is this important? It's important because once you can meet or adhere to the requirements of the standard, you can at least say that you've covered controls around preventive, detective, and corrective controls, which the ISO 27001 is really keen about. Another one I'll talk about is the NIST cybersecurity framework. The NIST cybersecurity framework is also very similar to the ISO 27001 standard, and it helps organizations in terms of building their security maturity. What is how mature are we in terms of our security controls? What do we have in place? And this is divided into 6 key areas. Previously, it used to be 5, but the new updates to NIST introduce the governance, which is very critical because in that case, organizations begin to think about the context of their organization. What is our context? What is our mission? What are our objectives? What are our key risks? What are our critical suppliers and things like that? So they begin to put that into perspective. And outside of that, the other 5 areas touches on identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, which is also key in terms of security controls. So having said that, we also want to touch on the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. This is a regulation that protects personal data and privacy. And GDPR is also very key because we're in a space right now where we collect data. A lot of companies collect different types of data, and once they collect this data, they need to start thinking of how can we ensure that this data that we are collecting, this data that we are processing, data that we are storing, and so on, and what are we doing to ensure that we keep this data secure? What are we doing to ensure that we protect this data? Because the truth is that as a customer, for example, if I have my data in an organization, I'm not going to find it funny if I have my confidential data sit in the public space without my consent and things like that. So the organization needs to start thinking about what do we need to do to protect our data adequately and accurately, which is also another key regulation within organizations. Another one I'll talk about is the PCI DSS. PCI DSS, it's not for every organization, but particularly for organizations that have to do with card holder data. Why is this important? It helps to prevent card issues because organizations that process, store, and transmit card holder data need to begin to think of what are the requirements we need to meet, what are the technical controls. Have we looked at the vulnerabilities we have within our environment? What are we seeing in terms of our network? Do we even have segmented networks in place and things like that? Who are our third parties? What are the policies that we have? And so on and so forth. So PCI DSS has 12 requirements that is particular and tailored towards organizations that store, process, and transmit card reader data, which is very important. This is also like a regulation that especially lots of financial organizations need to comply to. So again, like I said, nature of business. So based on the nature of business of organizations, they begin to think about what do we need to comply to, what standard, what framework, what regulation are we need to start looking at, what do we need to comply to.
Here, comes, to the questions. And what are the biggest challenges organizations face in achieving and maintaining compliance? Now, I'm a company, okay, or I'm an organization, and now I just decided to be a compliant, with this kind of frameworks. Now, what is like the first challenges that I kind of found and I have to work on to achieve that compliance? Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a good question. So there are different challenges organizations face, and I'm going to talk from practical experience because one of the key things I do is to support organizations to comply to best practice requirements. So I think I have good experience in this area. So what are the challenges? First, keeping up with changing regulations. The thing is that the standards, the regulations, they change. Because a lot of things are evolving. You will agree with me that some of the things that are obtainable 10, 8 years ago are not the things that are obtainable right now. So technology is evolving. Even the way we do things is evolving. Cyber attackers, cyber criminals, they're also evolving. They are becoming very sophisticated. So as a result of this, regulations will change, standards will change, frameworks will change. I think some organizations struggle to keep up with this. A good example, previously, it was a 2013 version of the ISO standard that was published. But last year, the 2022 version was published, and organizations are given 3 years to transition from the 2013 version to the 2022 version. Now, an organization that is used to the 2013 version and don't have the right skills, expertise, or whatever they need to achieve the 2022 version will begin to struggle. They don't have the resources. They're already used to the way of doing things. They don't want to get to that new point. They'll begin to struggle. So keeping up with those regulations. Also, if they don't have someone within the team that manages regulations, standards, frameworks, and understand when these changes come, it becomes a challenge for them. So this is one of the challenges that organizations face when meeting compliance requirements or achieving compliance. Another thing has to do with integration, knowing what to comply to and when to comply to it. So, for example, I've mentioned different standards and frameworks. Some organizations are still not clear. What do we need to comply to? What requirements do we need to meet? There are some organizations that are not bound by any industry regulation or standard, for example. So, because of this, they are not sure. Do we actually need to comply to anything or not? Or do we just fold our hands and assume everything is fine? So, not knowing what to comply to becomes a challenge for organizations like this. So also the complexity of having different standards and frameworks. How do we integrate to ensure that we are implementing the right set of controls? We have all of these standards in our faces. Isn't this too much for us? So that complexity in itself, PCI DSS 12 requirements, ISO 27001, 93 controls, and different sets of mandatory clauses, GDPR, 7 principles. So all of those things, and then need cybersecurity framework to 6 domain areas. So when you look at all of those things, it becomes a lot for some organizations to deal with, and it becomes complex. How should we approach this? Do we have the right skills, expertise? Do we have the right resources, even financial? Because for some of those requirements, they need to outsource them. So do we have what it takes to meet and ensure that we comply to these requirements? So that's the challenge that they face. For example, a small business may have resource constraints to comply to some of these requirements because, one, they may not have the skills in-house. Two, the cost of outsourcing these compliance requirements can also be a lot for them. So they may not have what it takes to comply to some of these requirements. And the thing about cyber attack is that it doesn't matter the size of the business. I mean, when the attackers strike, they strike. Whether you're small, whether you're medium, or whether you're a large business, they just strike, and that's it. So it means that whether it's a small organization or not, they need to ensure that their security posture is key. Another challenge is even security culture. It's difficult. One of the things I've realized about security is that compliance may seem easy, but the culture in itself, getting people to change the way they do things becomes difficult. Telling people that this is how we need to start doing business now. These are the things we need to start looking at. These are the controls we need to begin to implement, and all that is a lot of work in itself. So getting the culture right can also be a challenge, because if the culture is not right, compliance just becomes a tick in the box exercise, and it's just a matter of time. It's just going to die down within the organization. But if the culture is right, compliance will not be a tick in the box. Compliance will be something that, even outside of that, people will just say, it's not because you want to comply, but because you want to do things right. And you find that by doing things right, you are doing it right, one, so you are complying. So you are winning both ways, which is very good. So that can also be a challenge. Now, the last one I'll talk about is continuous improvement. The thing about compliance is that you need to continually improve. You need to think about how your organization can get better. So you're not just complying because we want to comply. What are we doing to improve the system? What are we doing to improve the process? What are we doing to improve our technology? I've seen cases where we go to organizations, and I mean, what we meet the previous year is not what we are seeing in the current year. They found ways to improve the way they do business. They found ways to improve the way they do things. They've looked at their security objectives and looked at the things they can do to ensure that they improve on it, which is very important. So this can be a challenge for some other organizations, not understanding how to improve and continue to monitor their environment, to continue to monitor their security activity.
And yeah, I mean, like, now let's say that I've been through this kind of challenges and I didn't know how I can deal with that. And let's say I'm just going through, okay, I'm not going to go for compliance. Now the question comes, what are the potential legal and financial consequences of no compliance? What if a company just, they just accept to go for no compliance and they didn't care about it? Now, this is absolutely going to generate some legal, I can say, legal and financial consequences, right? So what are those ones, and what are the potential ones?
Okay, for financial loss of revenue, it's very possible to lose money. Not complying to some standards and frameworks can make the organization lose money. And this can happen through different ways. One can even be by way of a cyber attack. I'm not saying that companies that comply do not face cyber attack. It is possible, but not comply puts at a bigger risk, because it means that you've not looked into details around the controls, key controls around preventive, detective, and corrective controls. If you've not complied, then there's every possibility that you don't have those controls in place, or you've not looked into details into those controls. Another financial implication is fines. And probably be liable to fines and penalties. GDPR, for example, the ICO, for example, in the UK, when there's a breach, you need to comply by reporting within a certain time frame. And if you don't do that, you will be fined. So non-compliance to that alone can make the organization liable to those kind of fines and penalties, which is a very big one. Another one I'll talk about for regulatory. So this also falls on that financial and of course regulatory, because it's also a regulatory consequence. If you don't comply, you definitely have to pay the fines. Which is a big one for a lot of organizations. So also, in terms of regulation, it could also mean that the regulatory body already has their eyes on you. They'll begin to pay more attention to your organization, because what you're telling them is that you've not complied to certain requirements that is mandatory for you to comply to. So your organization will probably be on a, so to say, watch list. They'll begin to have their eyes on you. They'll want to monitor you closely. And maybe if they space out audits, for example, or reviews for other organizations, they probably pay more attention to yours, because you've not met the requirements, and they will need to continually monitor to see if you can meet that. So these are some of the consequences of not complying, especially around financial and regulatory impacts. The other one I would just like to add to this is there's also a reputational damage of not complying to different standards and frameworks. The organization's reputation is at stake, because don't forget that when an attack happens, for example, there's always a part of the reputation of the organization that is affected. People will talk about it. It will be in the media, in the public space. Everybody will pay attention. And if it's an organization maybe that deals with money, people's money, for example, it now becomes tricky. People begin to start thinking, do we want to continue to do business with this organization? This company didn't comply to this, and as a result of this, they've lost money. They've had to pay huge amounts of fines. Is this a kind of company we want to do business with, or do we need to start thinking about their competitors? So these are like some things that affect organizations when they do not comply to standards, regulations, or laws as applicable.
Yeah, like come right now to the small and medium-sized companies, or enterprises. Basically, even I got some questions when I put the form in my LinkedIn, and I got some questions from some owners of startups, and they asked me the question, like, there are small businesses now, how they can manage compliance with limited resources. Like when it comes to limited resources, it comes to financial, limited resources, because when we want to be compliant, we have to spend some money too, right? So they are actually like, a small, I can see like startup, okay? They don't have that kind of, good financial resources. So how they can deal with that?
Okay, so I'll just give like some points on this. First, that I would say is that it's important to understand the nature of their business. So they need to state in clear documentation, what do we do in this organization? What is our business about? What is our vision? What is our mission? What are our goals? What are our products? What are our services? What are our objectives, and so on? So it needs to be clear, because if that is not clear, then the point we're getting to, which is compliance, they may not get to that point. That's one. So they may not understand how to manage their resources effectively. They don't even understand what they do in their business environment. Having said that, they need to begin to identify the regulations, the standards, whatever it is that is applicable to them. What is applicable to us in our organization? If we're maybe based on the nature of our business, in the space that we play in, or in the country that we are located in. We need to comply to these certain requirements. They need to first understand it and identify it, which is important. Now, when they've done that, they need to do like a cost-benefit analysis, begin to weigh their options. If we decide to do this in-house, for example, what is our spend? What do we have to spend? Due to the fact that we have limited resources, for example, maybe financial, human, and all of that. So we begin to weigh that. What is our cost-benefit analysis? If we decide to outsource this, the same thing. What's going to be our cost? What's the benefit and all that? So when they weigh that, analyze that, then they can begin to say that, okay, based on this analysis that we've done, maybe it's better for us to outsource at this point. And I've seen a lot of small businesses, startups, at first they begin to outsource, because it could be cheaper for them to do that. But when they now get to a point that they've grown a little bit more and they can handle things themselves, they now begin to take the responsibility in-house. And by doing that, they also need to invest in training. They need to train their employees, equip them with the right skills, ensure that they have the right people on board, and give them the right things they need to be able to carry on with it going forward. Also, another thing I'd like to mention is they need to understand their risk in the business where they play in, the space that they play in. What are the risks that exist within this business that we play, especially when it comes to security? So understanding those risks would also help them to know how to, manage the resources they have and also achieve compliance. And the last one is they need to plan for incidents. The truth is that the way incidents work or attacks work, it's not really a case of if, it's a case of when. Big organizations that you will never imagine are falling to different kind of incidents and attacks, not to talk of small organizations. So they need to have an incident response plan in place and ensure that they test it from time to time.
So I got, another questions, through the forums that I put on my LinkedIn, and some people, asking about the difference and the main difference between mandatory compliance and voluntary compliance frameworks. Now, is it like something like I'm obliged to follow or not? It's something like this. So what is the difference between the both terms?
Okay, so mandatory compliance frameworks are frameworks or standards that organizations are required, is mandated by regulatory bodies, like I said previously. For example, financial institutions may be mandated to comply to certain standards and frameworks because of the type and the nature of their business and the space they play in. Will agree with me that as we are on this call right now, if you get an alert maybe from your bank that somebody has withdrawn a certain amount of money and it's seizing you, you probably need this call and tell me that we should have this call at a different time, which means that financial organizations are very critical, and because of the space they play in, they need to be guided by different regulatory bodies, and because of this, they are mandated to comply to certain standards and frameworks. I'll use the country where I come from as an example, Nigeria. In Nigeria, we have the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is the regulatory body that manages all the affairs and activities of all banks in Nigeria. Now, the Central Bank, based on one of their documented release of what banks need to comply to, they stated a list of standards and frameworks that all banks must comply to every year. Examples of these standards include the ISO 27001, ISO 22301, which is business continuity, ISO 20000, which is service management, PCI DSS, which I've also talked about, NDPR, which is for data protection and privacy. So the banks are mandated. So it's not a case of we would like to. No, it's a case of you must. They are mandated to comply to it. But if the framework, if it is voluntary, so there are some organizations that they are less critical. They are not bound to comply to any regulation, any standard or framework. It's if they want to. And I've seen organizations like that. They just come and they say that we just want to be proactive. We want to stay ahead of current threats. We want to understand what it is for us in terms of our security posture. Nobody is pressuring us. Nobody is forcing us. Nobody is saying we should meet it, but we just want to do it. because we want to improve our security posture. And because of that, they decide to comply to some standards and frameworks just by their own will. And that is what voluntary means. But if it is mandatory, you have no choice. You just have to comply to it.
Exactly. And right now, come to talk about, the technology and how it really impacts this kind of compliance. Right now, we know that we're living in a new area of the critical, and super important technologies like artificial intelligence. And we know that, companies started, already to apply the use of artificial intelligence, inside a company, because it's really make things easier. Now, I know, the appearance of each technology, this is absolutely going to influence and going to just oblige an impact of update of that compliance. Now, the main question, how is the technology influencing the landscape of cybersecurity compliance? Now, what is the impact of new technology on the compliance itself?
Okay, that's a very good question. Different ways technology is impacting or influencing compliance. One, through automation. Back in the days, many years ago, a lot of processes were done manually, but now we're seeing changes. We're seeing lots of automation. We're seeing different tasks being automated. For example, a policy compliance task that can be done manually, maybe using an Microsoft Excel sheet, can now be automated using a service now, for example, where different people, when it's time to review their policy, meet different compliance requirements, they just get an email saying that, giving them a reminder to tell them that this is due for a review, this task is due for implementation and things like that. So automation has kind of changed a lot of things, and thanks to technology for that and for that kind of improvements. Also, artificial intelligence is something that's come to stay. Back in the days, I don't think we had conversations about artificial intelligence, but we are here today and we're talking about artificial intelligence. A lot of organizations use it for different things, especially a lot of tools that we have now that can detect and predict security threats are being driven by artificial intelligence. So it has come to stay, and it is doing a lot in terms of also supporting with compliance efforts. Because all you have to do is to check your email and maybe wait for an alert that says that continue to monitor this or continue to watch this because this is a suspected threat, something like that. And this is driven by lots of analytics. AI is playing a lot in that space to drive those conversations. Another thing I'll talk about is compliance tools. Governance risk and compliance tools. We have a lot of them right now. Previously, you have to do a lot of risk assessments using your spreadsheets. You have to do a lot of compliance requirements using your spreadsheets. But currently, a lot of organizations are exploring the use of governance risk and compliance tools, where what you just need to do is to have those tools in place. You input what you want. If it's a standard, a particular standard, even based on configuration, all the controls of the standard will be present in that tool. And all you have to do is to begin to check which you have complied to currently, which control have you not complied to, and what you need to do. And also, again, tying back to automation, whoever is responsible for implementing that control just gets an email from that tool saying that you need to review this control or you need to check this control. So technology has played a lot in this space to support these processes, which is very good. Another one I'll talk about is even for simulation, for phishing simulation exercises, for example, there are tools that are available for using, even for awareness, security awareness. Now there are lots of tools that are available. So all you have to do is log into the platform. Previously, is the traditional way where someone has to stand in front of everyone and say, these are the do's for security practices, these are the don'ts for security practices, do this, don't do this, and so on. But currently, there are a lot of tools out there. All you need to do is to log into that platform, and then you have someone that is already animated talking to you and saying, these are the do's, these are the don'ts, and all of that. So you see that technology has come to shape things, and cybersecurity is not left out in what technology is shaping.
And yeah, right now I can say okay, I'm compliant. I did my best that everything is fine in my side. But the question comes right now, what about my partners? So I mean, like, how will an organization ensure that supply chains partners are also compliant with cybersecurity standards? Now, I'm dealing with another partners. We have a business, between each other. Now, and this is really, I can say, like, means to me, right? So means a lot to me because I am compliant. I'm doing my best to keep my standards applied. Everything's fine with me. But what about my partner? So how I can ensure that the company that I'm dealing with them or my partners, they are also respecting this kind of standards?
Yeah, so your third party, your partners, companies are dealing with, how can you ensure that they're also complying? What are the things you need to do? I mean, I'm very big on third party security, and the reason is that a lot of breaches that we see out there, it comes from the suppliers, the supply chain. And if you are not mindful of their own activities, it means that their action or their inaction is going to cost you as an organization. And that breach is always very catastrophic. So having said that, what are the things that you need to do that those guys are also complying? One, do your due diligence. Before onboarding any vendor, do your due diligence. What are the standards and the frameworks that they are complying to? It's not just a case of sending a questionnaire. I see a lot of organizations, I mean, what they do is they send out questionnaires. The vendor just fills in what they want because nobody is going to check. So you ask them, are they in compliance with the standard? They put yes. Are they compliant with the framework? They put yes. What are their authentication mechanisms? They put anything they like. What do they have in terms of access control? They put anything they like. Or how do they manage passwords effectively? They put anything because nobody is going to question them. But when it comes to due diligence, you have to do the proper due diligence, because if you do not do it, it's just a matter of time. The truth is that even organizations that are applying preventive measures are getting breached, not to talk of organizations that are not applying it. So you see that the risk is high. If you do a risk assessment now for two organizations, and you do a risk assessment for an organization that has implemented the ISO 27001 standard, you will still find some risks in their environment. Now do a risk assessment for an organization that has not implemented the standard. You'll find that the risk will be double or triple of the one that more than the organization that has implemented it. So what that means is that the risk is higher for an organization that has not even implemented preventive control. So having said that, you need to do your due diligence on organizations, your third-party organizations. That is one. Two, it does not end at due diligence, because imagine if you engage a third-party supplier for 5 years and you do a due diligence just once. Don't forget that when it comes to risk assessment, your risks can be low today and it can be high tomorrow. And we have seen a lot of instances of that in lots of examples. You can have no risks today and things will just turn around and the risk will become high tomorrow. Is an example of just recent happenings here in the UK, for example, and this is not even about information security now. An area that was safe, or that is termed as safe, just recently, and an attack happened in that area, and just because of that, it led to a massive protest. Now, imagine if a risk assessment has been done in that area in the last 2 years, and that area has been marked as safe because every activity in that area has been calm. But now you see that low risk has now become a high risk just because of an incident that happened. So if they're going to get another risk assessment of that area, the risk will no longer be low just because of the incident and the outcome of that incident. So what I'm saying is that risks can be low today does not mean that it's going to be low forever. So even after the due diligence that you do for your third parties, you have to continually evaluate them. Monitor their activities and continually evaluate them. Are they meeting up with their service level agreements? Do they still have all the things they said they have in place? So every year, still check with them. You said you have this as a last year. Do you still have it in place as of this year? What are the practices that you have? So ask specific questions and make sure that you don't use a one-size-fits-all approach, because your vendors are different. So vendor A is different from vendor B. Always ensure that you also ask your questions based on the criticality of that vendor to your business.
Exactly. Thank you so much, for this answer. I mean, come right now to the last question, and this is a specific one, for the people that they have the passion for the cybersecurity, even my students, and the people that I know that they want just to make a conversion from the field to another. Since your background is so amazing and absolutely, your answer going to mean a lot to them. So yeah, in each podcast we ask that a question. Would you like to convey a message to those passionate about cybersecurity? And and if you can share some points or some key points to stay motivated in learning the field and to improve your skills, and what is the mistakes that we have just to prevent to learn with a correct way the cybersecurity field.
Okay. Message to people who are interested in cybersecurity. I would like to start by saying that cybersecurity is evolving. You have to learn. You have to continue to learn. You can't stick to the old way of doing things. You can't stick to your previous knowledge. I just imagine that in 5 years' time, the knowledge you have today will still be relevant. You need to continually update yourself. And what you need to do by doing that is to learn. Continue to learn new concepts, learn new technologies, learn new tools, understand the field, which is very important. Another thing I would like to talk about is my 2-hour rule. I have a rule that if you want to be relevant in this field, dedicate at least 2 hours to this field, to the field of cybersecurity every day. A minimum of 2 hours should be dedicated to cybersecurity. You can dedicate more, but let your minimum be 2 hours. Another thing I would like to talk about is networking. Networking is key. Connect with people, engage with communities. There are lots of communities out there. Join communities. Don't isolate yourself. Don't do things alone, and see how you can also benefit from this community. You can also share your knowledge. If you are really knowledgeable, you can, come on these communities, share your knowledge to other people, see how to grow. Another thing I would like to talk about is give back. The community is always looking for people who are ready to give back. Give back. Once you started gaining experience, give back to people, mentor people, guide people, support people. We keep shouting that there are 3.5 million jobs that are not filled. Contribute. So when you contribute and hold the hands of 2 or 3 people, they too will get jobs. So the number will continue to reduce. I don't think it's a nice bragging right to continue to shout that we have 3.5 million unfilled jobs when we have people who are ready to fill up these jobs. But sometimes what they just need is the right guidance. What they need is someone to put their hands, to point them in the right direction. What they need is support from other people. So if you're that person that is giving back, you find that we continue to reduce the numbers until one day we hear that all the jobs are filled and people have jobs in the cybersecurity space. Lastly, I'll just say that stay passionate, stay curious. This field needs people who are very curious, people who are eager to know more, people who are hungry for more, people who are passionate, people who desire to know more. Thank you.
Dr. Akerele, I want to really thank you so much for being, an amazing guest today in this opposite. Thank you so much for your ability and the thoughts that you shared with us. It's such an honor, and literally, I hope just to have you in another episode.
Thank you.